God born in a manger. It is indeed an amazing story. And like so many of you in this room tonight, I have heard that story my entire life. As a child, I heard about it in Sunday school. It was read in my home every year at Christmas. For the past 30 years as a minister of music, I've been helping to tell that story in events just like Carols by Candlelight. As a matter of fact, I've been to so many Christmas cantatas and Christmas musicals and children's pageants, sometimes I think I know the shepherds on a first-name basis. Some of y'all may be the same way. But here's the danger. For those of us in this room that know that story so well, if we're not careful, we'll become so familiar with the event of Christmas that we'll miss the purpose of Christmas. You see, you and I, each person in this room tonight was created with a very specific purpose in mind, a very specific reason. We were created by God to have relationship with Him. Because of sin, it breaks that relationship. It forms a barrier between us and God, and that results in an empty place in our lives, a void that can only be filled by God, an empty place in the middle of our souls. And if you look around, you'll see people trying to fill that empty place with all kind of things. For some, it's fame. For others, it's fortune. For some, it's relationships. But at the end of the day, that empty place remains. But you see, God had a plan. The Bible tells us that in the fullness of time, which means when the time was just right, that God sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to be born in a manger. And you see, that's the story we've told tonight. That's the story that you know so well, that you've heard your entire life. But you need to know that that's not the end of the story. You see, for the next 33 years, this baby born in Bethlehem would grow up and then walk on this earth, healing the lame, giving sight to the blind, raising the dead. And then in the most incredible display of love in the history of this universe, this babe of Bethlehem would go to the cross of Calvary so that you and I might be saved. For you see, it was His death on the cross of Calvary that would remove our sins. It would serve as a sacrifice to remove the sin, the barrier between us and God, and allow that relationship to be restored, because now that empty place could be filled with the only thing that would fit, and that is God. I have to tell you, as Christians, we need to remember that when we celebrate Christmas, and it is great to celebrate it, but when we celebrate Christmas, it is always done so in the shadow of the cross. For you see, without the cross, Christmas is just another birthday. And that is the purpose of Christmas, this whole God come to earth in a manger thing. You see, it's taken on new meaning for my family this year. My mother-in-law died in February after a battle with cancer. And I've got to tell you, that was probably the saddest and the darkest and some of the loneliest days in our family's life. But in the midst of all of that, listen to me, we had hope. And we had a peace that passes all understanding, because we had the confidence that Barbara, many years ago, had looked past the event of Christmas and understood the purpose of Christmas, and had accepted Christ in her own life. And as a result, when she died, just like you and I one day will do in this room, everybody in this room is going to die. When Barbara died, she died with a relationship with Jesus Christ, and tonight she's spending eternity with Jesus. Now, I know that sometimes this whole God come to earth in the form of a baby thing can be a little bit unbelievable. I mean, if you think about it, it can be overwhelming. And if you have trouble believing that, you would not be the first. As a matter of fact, his name was George. And George was a good man. George was a great father. He was an outstanding husband. He was an outstanding leader in his community, highly respected, honest. He was a good person. But George just could not buy that whole God come to earth in the form of a baby thing. That whole Jesus story was beyond what he could believe. And he was way too honest to imply otherwise. So he told his wife on this particular Christmas Eve, "Honey, I hate to disappoint you, but tonight I will not be going to the Christmas Eve service with you and the kids. I'll wait up for you when you return, but I cannot go. I would feel like a hypocrite." So George stood in the yard and watched his family drive away for the Christmas Eve service, turning to walk back in as the snow began to fall in the yard. He walked inside and sat down in his chair behind or by the fireplace and began to read the paper. Not too long after that, he started to hear a thud sound, and then another, and then another, and he thought, someone must be throwing snowballs at the window. George got up and walked over to the door, and what he found as he looked outside was a flock of birds that had been caught in the unexpected storm. And they were huddled up, and they were trying to find safety, and they were flying into the glass window seeking light and warmth. And George thought, well, I can't let these birds die. And he thought about the barn out back where his family stabled the pony, and he knew it would provide warmth and it would provide a place for them to find shelter. So George put on his coat and he waded through the snow and he walked out and opened up the doors to the barn, turned on the light, but the birds did not move. So George thought maybe food will entice them. So he goes inside and he gets breadcrumbs and he comes back out and scatters the breadcrumbs along the snow leading to the barn, but the birds will not move. So George thought, I think they're afraid of me. I mean, after all, he must have been a very terrifying sight to see this large creature who was shaking his arms and screaming and yelling and trying to shoo them. And he thought, if only there was some way that I could help them to understand I'm here to help them. I'm not here to hurt them. But how? How can I communicate that? How can I show them I'm here to help? And then he thought, well, if only I could become one of them. Well, then I could walk with them and I could talk with them and I could tell them that I'm here to help them find safety, and I could lead them into the warmth of the barn. But I would have to become one of them so they could see and hear and understand. At that moment in the distance, the church bells began to peal. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. And a verse came into George's mind that he had heard his entire life, but now the verse took on meaning for the first time. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And he fell on his knees in the snow and believed.
I believe that the Christ who was slain on that cross has the power to change lives.